One of the best ways to grow your collection is through the expedition format. You get some bonus XP, you get some nice rewards at the end, and naturally folks have asked, hey, when are you going to do some expedition content? And the answer is now. For this video, I'm going to go through the process of drafting, and I'm going to explain each of my picks in depth along the way. And then other videos this week are going to be me playing with the deck that I drafted so that you can kind of get the full experience. I didn't want to do it all in one video because honestly, it's going to be kind of lengthy. Even this video, I imagine, because I'm long-winded, will likely be a bit long. And trying to fit gameplay on top of me explaining everything is a tall order. So I'm not going to make you sit through it all in one video. It's going to be videos throughout the week where I am, again, playing in the expedition format. So that's enough of the intro. Let's go ahead and begin our first trial here. Now, your first pick is obviously important because you are not just picking cards, but in many ways you're also picking regions. And what I mean by that is that the game, once you pick your first two regions, will, for the most part, only show you picks from those regions, with the exception of what they call wild picks. So as you're going through the draft process, there's a number of picks that they will designate as wild picks, and those can come from potentially a third region. So in expeditions, you can go all the way up to 3 regions total, but your core deck is going to be spread traditionally across 2 regions. And so you want to make a great pick is your first pick, but you also want to keep in mind regions that you want to target. And if you're asking, well, what are the regions that you really like? Well, personally, when I'm playing Expedition, I'm a big fan of Demacia because they've got a lot of very interesting combat tricks and things of the like. They're also one of the few regions that has a lot of support for almost like a mono build. Like if you go heavy elites, for example, you can get a lot of benefit if you go Demacia. Another region that I really like is Shadow Isles because it allows you to do a little bit of everything very well. And after those two, Noxus is safe anytime you want to be aggressive in limited formats. That's usually a pretty safe bet because you can punish people if they have bad builds, clunky draws. So Noxus is like a good secondary or follow-up. One of the reasons I try to stay away from it, though, is there are some cards in Noxus that are very kind of combo or synergy oriented, and as such, if you try taking too many of those but you don't get enough pieces, it can feel a bit clunky. It's the same reason why I love Piltover as a region, but I don't traditionally go Piltover very often when I'm playing Expedition, just because I think that a lot of the better stuff in Piltover is very synergy based. Like the discard mechanics are great, but if you get a bunch of stuff where you're discarding cards and not enough activators, right, cards that you get to play for free when they're discarded, it can feel a little bit clunky. And so I don't traditionally go Piltover. Ionia is pretty safe because of the sheer number of elusive units, but it also has a couple of kind of combo-y pieces. If you do go Piltover, Piltover has a lot of elusive units as well, and that's like your safe bet. Elusive is pretty solid in constructed play, as you well know, and naturally it's just as good when you're in the expedition format. And anyway, let's talk about these options. So here we have Noxus, but we get Draven, Decisive Maneuver, and Precious Pet. These are 3 cards that are all decent, but don't have a lot of synergy with each other. I mean, with the exception of Draven and Precious Pet kind of being aggressive cards traditionally, these 3 picks are kind of all over the place. Demacian Steel, I think Garen is just an okay card in Constructed, but he's really solid in Expedition. Vanguard here is great, and it's even better if you can pair it with something like Ionia, where you can buff these in hand. Freljord's another great option with the Silverwing Vanguards because you can buff them potentially while they're in your deck. Anytime you can buff them before they're summoned so that when it comes into play you get buffed copies, it's just sheer value. So I love this card. Detain is okay in Limited. It's only okay in my mind because when you're playing Constructed, a lot of times you can detain another unit, and that's just that like last burst of tempo you need to finish somebody off, or you'll have just more ways to protect the unit that's doing the detaining. But when you're in a limited format, sometimes it can be a bit harder to either take advantage of that tempo boost, or it could be a bit harder to defend the unit that's doing the detaining. I'm not saying that it's bad, I'm just saying I don't think it's as good as it is in Constructed. Now, here we have Zed, who is just all-around solid unit, specifically in Expeditions, very aggressive with the quick attack, making copies. We have Duo, which is a fantastic elusive unit, and we have Deny, which is a great way to protect your elusives. So just in terms of sheer card quality, synergy, etc., this is clearly the best set of 3 cards. Like, if I take these 3 and I match it up against the other 2, these 3 are a better triplet in my mind. Now the question then is do I like these 3 enough to consider taking this as a region over these 2, knowing that I have to kind of go into them as future picks? And I think the answer is yes. I'm really comfortable drafting Demacia, but I think these 3 here are solid enough to say I'm okay with starting with Ionia. And so we're going to add that to our deck, and we've only got 14 more decisions to make. Remember when I said this was going to be a bit long-winded? All right. Now we have some additional choices, and this is going to be actually a bit tough. So here we have Shen, who I actually really like in Limited. The 5 health is pretty tough to deal with. There's a lot of ways to grant barrier, but even if they don't, forcing folks to basically kill Shen before they kill your other units is very, very frustrating. Yusari is an interesting card. A lot of people look at Yusari and they say, like, I don't know where this fits because I don't want my elusives challenging things. But it's actually pretty good in Limited. It's a 4 attack elusive unit, which is phenomenal. It has 3 health, so it's already above like Mystic Shot range. It's going to require some premium removal to get rid of it. And in a pinch, the challenger can pull other like elusive blockers away or just other primary targets away. Just because it's an elusive unit doesn't mean you don't want this to say like eat a Dawn Speakers if you run into one, for example, right? So it's a little counterintuitive, but it's a better unit than it looks. Green Glade Lookout is kind of just an okay 2-drop. The stat line's not great. Reducing the cost of an expensive unit in your hand can be good, but at a 2-drop, unless you like mulliganed incorrectly, you probably don't have a lot of expensive things in your hand. So the benefit isn't as cool as it sounds. Like the dream is getting your Yone or your Swiftfoot to be, 1 or 2 costs cheaper and catch people by surprise with a big tempo play. But the reality is if those are in your hand when you're playing this on curve, then, you're not really having a good time. So more Ionia stuff. This is like a middle of the road Ionia triplet in my mind. We have Thresh. Thresh is in Limited, in my opinion, just a really good challenger unit. You oftentimes do not get to level him up, and even if you do, you don't get to take really good advantage of it. Typically, the only times that I like Thresh in Limited is when I'm pairing it with Freljord, because if you do get to level Thresh up, giving yourself like a free Anivia or a free Tryndamere is huge, but the reality is a lot of times you just don't even get to level him up. We also have Tortured Prodigy here, which is neat, right? When an ally dies, refill your spell mana, and there's some cool things like with Deny here that you can do, but if you're not really taking advantage of this, like in a spell-based deck, like this is great with something like Piltover, but the reality is it's a 3/4 for 5, and that's just not very good. But we do have Vengeance here, and Vengeance is great in Limited because it's expensive, but it's unconditional hard removal, and sometimes that's exactly what you need in Limited. So Thresh is like middle of the road. Vengeance, very, very good. This I'm not a huge fan of, strictly because this is a great synergy pick, and we just don't have the synergy for it. And then we have Draven again, Blade's Edge, and House Spider. So this is just like 3 aggressive picks. So this is a little bit tougher than it might seem, because on the one hand, we've got some additional synergy stuff here, but these are all, in my opinion, kind of middle of the road. We have a great pick in Vengeance, and then like Ho-Hum, and then Bad. And then these are all middle of the road, but pretty solid aggressive options. And if we want to really go with this like elusive game plan, I think aggressive options might be our best bet. So in terms of like just this early on, the best 3 cards, the best triplet set is this, but this also means that we would be committed to Noxus, right, as our second region. Whereas we could take this kind of middle of the road pick and then be heavier Ionia, which is really tempting, because then that means going forward, we don't have to be locked into Noxus, and if other regions pop up that are a little bit better suited for us to combine with, then we have that flexibility. Because while these are okay, right, we don't have a lot of things that are going to really help us in terms of like combining with Draven. Like if this was a Darius, I would slam this easy peasy. But Draven here is kind of lackluster. This card is, you know, good, not great. This is just a pretty standard 2-drop. So I'm really leaning more towards this because I'm not a huge fan of what I'm seeing here as kind of like an all-in thing. Now, the one thing I want to note here is that Noxus has a lot of really good aggressive options. But if we want to try to really slam home this elusive game plan that this here started, this I think is the way to go. So we're going to go with the middle of the road pick to keep our options open. All right, so here, this is more barrier and lifesteal stuff. That's why it says shield wall. One of the things you'll also note is that you'll see things that are named pretty similar. And when you see these, even if you don't know anything about the cards, it can be very beneficial as a new player to say like, okay, I'm going to go with a shield wall draft. And if you just keep taking all the things that say shield wall or all the things that say shadow and dust, the game has named them as such to kind of take advantage of built-in synergy, right? So shadows and dust here is going to be like an ephemeral build, and it's oftentimes a combination of Ionia and Shadow Isles. So if you just like keep taking these, it's probably a safe, like okay build. So that's just something to keep in mind. So here we have 2/2 for 2, but it gives something lifesteal, and then this grants a unit barrier, but it's while it's in your hand, so that means that it'll have barrier the first turn you play it, but it also cycles and it's at burst speed, so you can take advantage of that. It's, you know, a spell, so it uses your spell mana. So this card is, in my opinion, like slightly better than it looks. And then we have just a big beater of an ephemeral unit and Keeper of Masks. And then over here, if we want to start going Shadow Isles, we have Scuttlegeist and Stirred Spirits. Now, I'm not a big fan of Stirred Spirits in Limited, but Scuttlegeist is a house. A lot of times you can play this for, you know, 4 or 5 on later turns, and getting, you know, a 4-cost 5/5 while developing other units later on can be pretty beneficial. But I'm not a big fan of this. So the question then becomes like, do I like this better while also locking in Shadow Isles as my second color? Or do I want to just take this safe pick and stay Ionia? Because I don't think that this one fits us well enough. The best way to look at Shadow Fiend, if you don't have any other synergy picks, is just like you're spending 1 mana to deal 4 damage to something. That's usually the outcome. Keeper of Masks is okay, but it only gives allies +1/+0 that are already in play. So for example, if you play this and then you have other effects that summon units that come down later, or if you mess up your sequencing, sometimes this basically does nothing. I mean, a 2/3 for 2 isn't bad, just as a generic stat line, but this is just kind of okay. Honestly, all of these are just kind of okay, just because this one's so good and this one's so bad. So I think we're going to play it safe, stick with this. Some of these we might look to trade out later. All right, we got some interesting choices now. So if we stayed Shield Wall, this would be basically trying to build like the Shen Fiora deck. We have Riposte, Riposte. I've heard it pronounced a million ways, and I got to be honest, I don't know what the proper pronunciation is. I feel bad. And then more barrier stuff. Here we have Ritual of Renewal, heal an ally 7 and draw 1. Or we also get to include Lifeblade, which is a phenomenal unit. So we have like an okay kind of bad card, but a really good card in here. And then we have another elusive unit and Shadow Shift, where you recall an ally to summon a living shadow in its place. A lot of times you use this to save one of your units when it would die, like if they kind of catch you with a surprise combat trick. And I really like these. I love this card. Like, Lifeblade is insane, but this card is just not very good. Where here you have two very solid cards, so this is the pick. Alright, so this is a bit of a tough decision. On the one hand, we've got Shield Wall again, but specifically what I love about this is these are two great elusive units in Limited. Windfarer Hatchling is a 4/2 elusive, but when it's summoned, it buffs all your other allies +2/+2 that round. So this is a great way to really buff your elusives and push home the victory. And then again, elusive lifesteal. I can't speak, high enough about that card. More of the ephemeral Shadows and Dust thing that we're not really building towards at the moment. And then on the other side, we have two cards that provide hand buffs, and these are also great when you're combining them with ephemeral units. Protector, not as much in my opinion, but Inspiring Mentor is phenomenal in a list like this. It looks so blah, but this is really a one cost 2/2 because you're getting 2/2's worth of stats total, and you're getting the +1/+1 usually on premium or choice units. Like buffing Zed is obviously a pretty big deal, but even a turn 1 this into a turn 2 buffed duo is great, because the 1 health on this is a bit of a drawback, right? It's a liability, and being able to even just go from 1 health to 2 health is kind of a big deal. So I love this card. However, it's really hard to pass these up. We need at least 1 Lifeblade in our deck. This is a great finisher. We don't have a lot of top end right now, so we're going to look to grab these later if we can. And right now we're all mono Ionia, so there's a very strong chance that these are going to show up more, but we're going to grab these right now because we want to ensure we get those when possible. So next up we have Mage Seeker Persuader, which is always an interesting card to me because it's a 6 cost 4/1 that can have a lot of health, but requires you to discard a spell. And it just feels really bad in practice because, like, to have a really good use of this, you need a really expensive spell. The only time I've seen this work out really well, in my opinion, is in Limited, because I don't think it's constructed worthy. But in Limited, when you're drafting the 3/3 that when it comes into play, it creates the 4 Demacia card in hand. If you draft multiples of that guy, because you will never need to play multiple for Demacias, or if you do, the game's already over. Being able to discard one of them, because they traditionally cost 6, to make this like a 4/7, and you didn't like lose any real net cards as a result, because you kind of got the 4 Demacia for free. Being able to make this a 4/7 challenger, great. But a lot of times in practice, this card is very clunky. Vanguard First Blade is really annoying to deal with in Expedition, though. This is a solid card. Over here we have Kinku Wayfinder and Will of Ionia. This is a great tempo card. This card right now is great because we're in mono Ionia, but we don't have 1 cost allies. If we had a couple of Inspiring Mentors, this card would be kind of cheeky. But right now, kind of lackluster. And then here we have Zephyr Sage, which is like card advantage. You're playing this for the long game, creating a copy of a card in hand. And then Steel Tempest, which is another tempo card. So this is a bit tough. It's between, I think, these two, strictly because these work, I think, the best with our existing build. This card is very strong. This card is a solid tempo option. In both of these instances, they're kind of synergy cards that we don't have the right stuff to support. However, we have far less to support this, so we're going to lean in here. And it's going to be easier, I think, for us to make up the drawback of this. If we can find, a couple of 1-drops, again, we're going to be looking for the mentors anyway, then this starts to gain value. And if not, we might get lucky and be able to trade this out of our deck. And yeah, speaking of 1-drops, we're now on our next pick here, and we have our choice between a second Deny with a Lookout, so great card and kind of middle of the road, Mentor, and then a Recall, which is again another great way to both save your allies, but also some of these comes into play effects. Being able to get them multiple times can be really interesting. Like if you've played this and then you want to do it again next round, like at the end of their turn, being able to recall this and then play it to attack in can sometimes be cheeky. And then over here we have Solitary Monk and Shadow Fiend. Monk is actually pretty solid, but Shadow Fiend, again, is not something we're kind of building our deck around. So it's between these two, and it's actually a really tough call. On the one hand, Deny is outstanding, but on the other hand, we would love to get at least a couple of these, and we're about halfway through our picks, so securing at least one is preferable. But it's really hard to pass up a second Deny. We're at 10 units to 4 spells. This one is really tough. And this is also interesting because on the one hand, we have this, which helps here. But if we didn't have this, I would probably pick this 100%. Like, the fact that we were forced to take this Wayfinder makes me second guess not picking this, because we don't want this to just be completely dead. But we're also looking to just trade this out of our deck. And so with that in mind, I think we're just still going to take this. It's a shame that we don't get like Mentor combined with Deny, but we're going to go ahead and do this. Okay, now we've got great picks all around. On the one hand, we have Deathmark and Shadow Shift. Again, this saves an ally. This removes Ephemeral from an ally to grant it to an enemy. This is great with Zed and some of the other cards because you can basically use it like removal. We have another Lookout and then a Lifeblade. So again, I'm not a huge fan of these, but I do love me some Lifeblades. And then we have Sown Seeds and Mentor. So these are hand buff cards. And right now I'm leaning between these two. Even though I love Lifeblade, I don't think I want a third Lookout to get it done. But we could use... See, Ionia doesn't have a lot of like hard removal. So Deathmark is actually, I think, much greater value in a mono Ionia list than it looks, because you just don't have a lot of ways to permanently deal with things. But being able to buff your elusives, this is better than it looks because, again, you can use spell mana for it, and it's burst speed, so they can't really do anything about it. And Mentor is just Inspiring Mentor, like it's that good, so... Bit of a tough call. I think we're going to go with this for now, though. All right. More great choices. Zephyr Sage, Spirit's Refuge are okay. Again, these would be the sorts of cards you would want in like a Fiora Shen deck, but we're not really in that direction. Like, yeah, we have the Shen, but it's not like our long-term plan. Blade Scout and Spirit's Refuge. Again, like, Refuge is actually a pretty solid card. Being able to surprise give something lifesteal at burst speed is a pretty big deal. I like this card. This is an okay one drop. It's like dealing 2 quick damage. But we have Dawn and Dusk and Shadow Shift. Now, I don't think that I really want a second Shadow Shift. I think one is probably enough in a list like this, so we might trade one of these out if we get the opportunity. But Dawn and Dusk... This is a card that I think struggles a bit in constructed play because there are so many ways to disrupt Dawn and Dusk going off. But in limited and as a one-of Silver Bullet in our list, and the fact that we've already drafted a hatchling, I think it's almost mandatory we take this. So if you don't know, if you have a hatchling on the board already, right? So you're not playing it that turn, though you can late game. When you have like full spell mana for 13, you can technically play both in the same turn on your attack. But if this is already in play and it comes around and you play Dawn and Dusk on your turn, when this summons the 2 copies of this, because the buff here is not a play effect, it's a summon effect, this will create 2 copies of Hatchling and they will both buff. So yeah, they're ephemeral copies, but you are creating an insane amount of stats on the board from these 2 cards alone. It is enough to almost win the game outright at times, and so we're going to take that. And now we have some very interesting choices. Shadow Shift and Will. We love Will, but I don't think we want a third Shadow Shift. So sadly, I think we're going to pass here. Deny could be our third Deny and then 1 Ghost. And I'm actually a big fan of Ghost Unlimited as a 1 or a 2 of, because being able, for example, to give... A lot of times when you play Zed, the first time they'll like block the ephemeral thing just to keep you from leveling your Zed, and then they're trying to buy themselves time. So when you come back the second time, if you can ghost Zed, then that's where you can get him to level up. But anyway, like a third deny is welcome. I don't think I would run more than 3, and even then that's hit or miss, I think, in limited. But here we have Emerald Awakener and Shadow Assassin. Both of these cards are great in limited. This is a 2/2 with a premium keyword, and it cycles. And this card is, I think, better than it looks. If the games go long, being able to pay 3 for a 6/6 lifesteal is oftentimes enough to win the game. But if I'm being honest, if you've got enough hand buff effects, and right now we don't, but at times if you have enough hand buff effects, even this becoming like a 3/3 for 3 with lifesteal is enough to make it very, very annoying in the early game. But I think we take this anyway just because the value of Shadow Assassin is too high alone. And I don't think we need a third deny that much. Alright, so we have Windfarer Hatchling number 2 and maybe Spirit's Refuge. We have Lifeblade, which I'm a huge fan of, and another hand buff card, and then a second Dawn and Dusk with Shadow Assassin. I don't think I want a second one of these, but I love this. However, this is going to be our winner. Like I don't even need to see much else. And if you're wondering why this is the winner, Lifeblade is it's just a premium card in this format because it has 2 of the best keywords in the game. And then this is another hand buff card, and we are running shockingly short on those. We really just have like the 1 mentor and then the sown seeds. And it's something that with as many elusives as we are running, it's something we're going to value more and more now. So we're going to grab this. All right, bit of a tough call here. There's a lot of good stuff here. So we've got Mentor, which we need more of, and it would be a second Mentor to help out with our Wayfinder. We won't always get, double value, but on the off chance you do find the Wayfinder and you haven't drawn both your Mentors, then, you get some value there. But also Highwayman, which is annoying, so annoying, and we've got some of those bounce effects in the like shadow shifts, for example, so you can keep replaying these, which then makes more and more tokens. Like this is like a chump block specialist, and it can be super annoying. So I love the pairing of these two. But over here we also have Blade Twirler, who can grow kind of at an annoying pace, and then another Shadow Assassin that I'm a huge fan of. And then we have a Usari and a Sparring Student. These are okay. But really, for me, it's going to come down between these two because we like them both a lot. So the trick is, in my mind, we have to see how many stun and recall effects we have to see whether or not it's worth it to push these two over these two. Because we desperately want another Mentor here, but we would love to take this. So if we can basically make the argument that the value of this is greater than this, then it might be worth taking here. So we're just going to go through and see how many stun and recall effects we actually have. And that's not looking so good, right? All right, so we've got 2 shadow shifts, because if you recall your own units, 1 will, so we're up to 3. So we have 3 triggers for the Blade Twirler, but we're going to have more hand buff options. If we take these 2 together, we'll have more hand buff options that directly benefit this. So I think this one ends up winning, but it was close. Shadow Assassin I'm a big fan of, and I do like this card, but we have more support for this package, so that one wins. And then we have even more hand buff support here, and then we have some barriers, and then we have we could have 3 denies and 3 shadow shifts. While I love deny, I don't think we want 3 of each of these, so we're definitely going to take this here. A third Mentor means we can have 1 on turn 1, and then if we do hit the Wayfinder, we'll still have 2 more in the deck. Conspirator just directly benefits from Mentor as being your leading pick, right? Being able to make this a 4/3 and then bounce this and then use this the following turn to buff something else is huge. So we kind of slam dunk that pick. All right. Great stuff here. We have, again, kind of pseudo hand buff and giving something barrier. Could be a third Lifeblade though, which we do like. We have the scaled snapper here, which is neat, right? Like, you can choose to be aggressive or defensive. It's most often just going to be a 2-5 wall though, and then another knife blade, or blade twirler and another recall. So before we didn't take this because we didn't have many recall effects, but since that time we've drafted one conspirator, and this would be paired with another. And so on the one hand, I really like this pick. I love taking the life blade, and I'd also really like this scaled snapper, but I kind of want to take these. The elusive here is really good. The quick attack here is really good. Also, this having 3 health is nothing to scoff at. And again, it grows kind of out of control, right? Like, even if you just get 1 recall effect, paying 2 for essentially a 3/3 quick attack is very, very strong. So I think we're gonna grab these. All right, trade picks. So we can trade one of our lookouts for a refuge. We can trade our moose for a 4th mentor, or a deny for a student. Now, we do not want to trade the deny for a student. There's like 0 value there. There could be an argument to be made about Green Glade Lookout going, because again, like I said, that's kind of like a middle of the road pick, and to be honest, we don't have a lot of expensive units. We didn't find Swiftfoot or Yone, which are your big, like, blowout picks in Ionia. It's actually, it feels pretty bad that we didn't end up with one of those, but so this could be fine if we felt like we wanted one more combat trick. The other option here is we could trade Moose for a 4th inspiring mentor. So we have to basically at this point just determine, do we want more combat tricks or not? So let's kind of take a look at what our options are. This one doesn't really count as a combat trick. That's really more like a free cycle kind of option. Again, not really a combat trick. So we have 2 shadow shifts to maybe save our own unit, 1 Will of Ionia, and that's it. So as much as I would love a 4th mentor here, I think we're going to end up keeping the moose and then making this trade, because we are kind of heavy on 2s, so we're fine with losing one of these. These don't provide us a ton of value right now, and we're a little short on combat tricks. We'd like to be able to keep our stuff alive, so this ends up being the best trade that we can make. Now, keep in mind, you don't have to make a trade there. If they're all garbage, you can feel free to just pass. There's plenty of times where I've passed on making trades, but that's it. That's the draft, and that's all I'm going to do for this video. So this one was just a walkthrough, kind of explaining my thought process with going through a draft. Future videos this week are going to be me playing games. So you're going to see a run through at least this trial, and then depending on how good or bad this trial goes, because I'm going to be honest, right now I'm not super confident in this deck. Doesn't mean I can't go 7 wins. I feel like every time I say I'm not confident in this deck, it does amazing, and then every time that I'm like, oh, this should be pretty good, it goes horribly wrong. But nonetheless, the rest of the videos this week are going to be me playing games with this, and I'm going to put them all up, win or lose, so that you can kind of see how they go. And if this one goes like super poorly, right? If I go like 1-2 or something, and we're done by like Tuesday, then I'll do another round of drafts so you can see that experience and see the second trial. But anyway, that's it for this video. If you made it this far, thanks for listening to me babble. Thanks for watching. If it's your first time watching, consider subscribing at least long enough to see the rest of the Expedition series. I love you all, and remember, when you're playing Runeterra, #1 goal, have fun. See you next time.